up, you guys? My name is Grace Taylor, and you are listening to the Trauma Dump Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here with us. Today is episode 2, Generational Trauma. If you're watching us on YouTube, we have a set now. Heck yeah. Oh, so professional. I'm really excited. Right here is some of my collection of pins. I am a little bit of a pin collector. You notice we got Laura Olympus. Right here we have Dwight. We have Cuterus. And we also have a dumpster fire for the Trauma Dump Podcast. We also have this. I painted this and wrote it. It says, trauma isn't who you are, it's what you go through, which I think is key when we are speaking about any type of trauma. It's important to understand that we are not the trauma. The trauma is outside of us. We can become traumatized, but we are not our misgivings. So this week, we will be discussing the topic of generational trauma, or otherwise known as intergenerational trauma. If you would like to share on the show, please message us either in the comments down below on our YouTube or in our Discord. So, according to Michael G. Quirk, and I'm hoping I'm saying his name right, he is a MFT, or a marriage counselor in California. Generational trauma is a term used to describe the passing down of traumatic impact and emotional fallout. Some people also refer to it as intergenerational trauma. According to Dr. Goodyear and Dr. Foster, generational trauma, which is transmuted through attachment relationships where the caregiver has experienced relational trauma and has significant impacts upon individuals across the lifespan, including predisposition to further trauma. So, I'm not a licensed professional in anything, medical, counseling, psychiatry, none of it. I'm just someone who has gone through significant trauma, and I wanted to create this podcast so that we can further understand what trauma does, how it impacts us, and how we can adapt and overcome our traumatic experiences. If you or a loved one are going through some trauma, I would implore you to seek professional medical help on this, a therapist. You can see a therapist through, BetterHelp. They also have therapists through Cerebral, which you can also get medication from Cerebral. And I have links down below in our description so that you can get, 2 weeks of free therapy from BetterHelp. So please use it. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of often misunderstood topics. So if you need help, please go get help. We are here to support you and provide resources, but I'm not a professional. So take what I say with as much love and appreciation as you would take what your friend says. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. If you or a loved one think that you have generational trauma, I really want to say I'm very sorry. It is a very hard thing to go through, and it's also a very hard thing to go through alone. But what I would like to say is try to be the change. Go get help, get therapy. Because a lot of people recognize that, oh, my childhood was bad, or oh, I had some horrible issues that I went through, but I'm tough. I can get through it because my mom got through it, because my dad got through it, because my grandma got through it. Just because they got through it doesn't mean that they dealt with it in a healthy way. And it's always important to get help, especially when you feel overwhelmed. Going to therapy is not weak. It's actually really strong, and it shows a lot of courage. So let's get into intergenerational trauma and my connection to it. When I was growing up, I witnessed some of it. And as a kid, I even thought to myself, you guys need to see a therapist, like towards my parents and my grandparents. And to my understanding, my grandparents will and have really never seen a therapist. I'm talking about my, paternal grandparents. My papa has now passed on, and also my grandpa has passed on. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, however, goes to therapy, and it's really inspiring. And my mother now goes to therapy, and I also go to therapy. And I've seen a lot of things passed on from my grandmother to my mom to me, and a lot of it has to do with weight. A lot of it has to do with the way we see our bodies. Intergenerational trauma isn't just horrible things happening to you. It can also be those comments of, oh, you shouldn't eat so much at the dinner table. And then that can be passed down from the mother to her daughter of being like, oh, honey, you need to watch what you eat. I see that you got a lot of candy on your plate and not so many vegetables. And then that can be passed on from the daughter to her daughter of almond moms. I'm serious. It's a real thing. It is a real thing. When I was growing up, I often had to take on the responsibilities of my parents at a very young age, and I'm talking 10 years old. I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, the dishes, sweeping, mopping. If there was ever a mess, they would say, Grace, clean this up. People would leave their clothes all over the floor, and then somehow it would be my fault, and I'd get yelled at because there was clothes all over the bathroom floor when there was a hamper right there. And I'm not just saying, I had to pick up after my brothers, because I'm the oldest of three. I have two younger brothers. No, I had to clean up after my parents. My dad, especially, would leave his clothes all over the bathroom floor. And a lot of pressure was put on me at a young age to pick up after everyone, because my mom didn't. She was a career woman. And so she and my father both ran their own businesses, and so all of the housework fell on me, which was not great. And it led to me being an overfunctioner, extremely so. I don't know if any of you all can relate to this, but I've read a lot about older children, specifically older daughters, the eldest daughter, being left with picking up after everybody else, becoming the mother when the mother couldn't be the mother. And it's not great. I really think it's something that we need to change. We need to stop parentifying our children because they're capable. There's a difference between having responsibility and being the scapegoat, and being the maid, and being the household manager for your family when you're a child. And I'm not talking about, being a teenager where, you should learn how to take out the trash, how to do the dishes, how to cook. I'm talking about being a 10-year-old and having to do everything for everyone. And it put me in a position where when I became an adult, I took care of everyone else first. That included my friends. And I really did not know how to take care of myself. I'm the oldest and only daughter of three. And I did a lot of the unseen tasks. What I mean by unseen tasks is that if that task is done, it's out of sight, out of mind. But if that task is not done, like say the dishes, for instance, everybody knows, right? So I did the dishes, I did the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, and many other unseen tasks that if I didn't do it for like one day I'd get yelled at. And it really traumatized me. It was a lot. It was very difficult and extremely stressful. And by the age of 16, I was also in college. I was getting my associate's degree out of high school. And at the same time, I was working odd jobs. I did babysitting, I was a maid, and this is outside of the home. And it was hard. I wanted to make as much money as I could before going to Texas Tech so that, I could spend money doing fun things and have a fun college life, because, my home life was so stressful with so many responsibilities. And, at the age of 16, I was like, I'm going to work as hard as possible so that I don't have to work while in college, so I can just enjoy college. I'm only 23, and I would say that I've achieved a lot for my age. But at the same time, I really do feel like I missed out a lot on being a kid, being carefree, being able to go over to a friend's house and play and do stuff like that. I can count on a number, I can count on my fingers how many times I got to do that as a kid. Because I had so many responsibilities. And it was very frustrating. And actually, I am putting an end to my overfunctioning. Before Friday, which today is Sunday, I worked as a nanny to 4 boys for off and on for about 7 years, but recently for a year and a half, every weekday. And I did everything. I did all the cooking and cleaning and laundry, and it was just a lot. 2-story house. And nothing was ever done because it's 4 boys and they're constantly making mess and they're constantly asking for this and this and this. And I decided that couldn't do it anymore. It was becoming detrimental to my health. It was becoming detrimental to my mental state of doing so much for everyone and feeling like I was not appreciated and that they were not learning how to take care of themselves, and they would just leave it all to me. And I decided, no, I'm not doing it anymore. It was too much. I did my best to help raise them, and I have reached a point in my life where I feel like I've done all that I can. And I'm not their parent, thankfully, and so whatever comes of whatever they're gonna do is up to them, and it's not up to me anymore. I chose my own sanity, and I think that's good. I think that's more healthy. My personal belief is that children should have various degrees of responsibility as they get older. And I think that differs from child to child, which responsibilities that they're capable of. Like, you wouldn't make a 3-year-old go take out the trash, right? But maybe a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old should start learning how to take out the trash, start learning how to do the dishes, start learning how to clean up after themselves. And even children that are 5 years old should learn that, hey, after we've put out all of our toys, let's pick them up, put them away, and then we can get them out again later. It's crucial to set children up for success and generational trauma kind of does the exact opposite. So, a cycle of intergenerational trauma carries from grandparent to parent to child and often repeats itself further down the family line. It can also spread to close relationships as well, to your friends, co-workers, and it can even flourish in marginalized groups. The cycle can, however, be broken, but it is very difficult. It's usually difficult because the trauma is internalized and it's hardly recognized within individuals until they see something different outside their family system. So for example, let's say that you are a 10-year-old and you have 5 siblings and your family lives in a shack, right? And you go to school and you live in a poor town, so it seems like everybody has the kind of same situation, right? But whenever you go home, you get beat by your dad. And it isn't until you go back to school that you talk about it, that you recognize that, hey, other people aren't getting beaten by their dad. And one kid invites you over to come to his house and he doesn't live in a shack and his parents don't drink all day. That's kind of how most intergenerational trauma becomes recognized, is when we see something outside of our norm. Canadian psychiatrist Vivian M. Rakoff, who's an MD, was among the first to explore the definition of generational trauma in 1966, after finding that rates of psychological distress were high among children of Holocaust survivors. I found this on the American Psychological Association. According to the National Council for Behavioral Health, approximately 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced at least one type of traumatic event in their lifetime, and approximately 90% of children who experience sexual abuse will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Over 90% of people with behavioral health disorders have experienced trauma. Let's let that sink in. What is behavioral health disorders? Can span from skin picking disorder, right? It can be OCD. Some people even link ADHD, and they link which ADHD has now enveloped ADD, but they link attention deficit disorders to trauma. Gabor Mate has linked ADHD and other attention deficit disorders to intergenerational trauma, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So some examples of generational trauma are domestic violence, alcohol and drug addiction, child abuse and neglect, which, sounds about right, refugees, and survivors of combat trauma and war-related trauma. Like, say, your granddad fought in Vietnam, and when he comes home from Vietnam, after all of the horrible things he sees, he starts to beat your dad. Anytime your dad messes up at all. Like spills a glass of milk. Beating. And so then your dad will punish you for anything that you do wrong. That's intergenerational trauma. It's more prevalent than a lot of people know. Manifestations of intergenerational trauma are emotional numbing and depersonalization, are unresolved and complicated grief, isolation and withdrawal, hypervigilance, fearfulness, memory loss, anger and irritability, nightmares, an inability to connect on a deeper level with other people, lack of trust, and other people. It can also lead to substance abuse and reoccurring thoughts of death, dying, or suicide. Now, when it comes to how generational trauma shows up in families, it varies widely depending upon the family dynamics. Like, for instance, whether the family is codependent, interdependent, or even extremely independent of one another. Whether or not there is a main abuser or there's several abusers within the family. I've found that a lot of people who are abusive will marry other abusive people. Like, some people that are emotionally abusive will also marry someone who is withdrawn and neglectful and can show abuse by not being around. You know, that is a form of abuse. It also shows up in families whether there's an outside influence, like a church. Like, religious abuse can become intergenerational. It can also show up in politics and an environmental issue like floods, droughts, hurricanes, tornadoes, stuff like that, and also famine. Okay, I need them to leave. They're jingle jangling. We gotta say bye to the cats. Joey will be picking up the cats now and trying not to be on camera.
Say hello to the babies.
Oh, it's so close. I don't know if they can see. Amazing. Hello to the babies. Okay, goodbye to the babies. Goodbye to the animals. So when researching, I found an article from Ensemble Therapy that helps gain a perspective on how does generational trauma show up in families. They say that generational trauma can affect a wide variety of families and show up in ways that you may not think of, such as a family might seem emotionally numb or have strong hesitancies against discussing strong feelings. The family may see discussing feelings as a sign of weakness. Another family might have trust issues with outsiders and seem continually conflictual. So they might, like, say you have a neighbor and your family, for whatever reason, really does not like that neighbor. Like, you don't know why they don't like that, but they don't like that neighbor, and there's always conflict with that neighbor. And some families might seem anxious or overly protective of their children or family members, or even when there's no threat of danger. So that's another sign of generational trauma, that if they are extremely overprotective for seemingly no reason. Gabor Mate, who is a Canadian physician, best-selling author, and speaker, has so many great resources on these aspects of generational trauma, as well as so much insight. He is an addiction expert and an insightful advocate on the effects of trauma and how it manifests within our bodies. I will be using his work as a reference in many more of my podcast episodes to come. I truly implore you to check him out. Like, seriously. I will be putting a link to one of his videos on the topic of generational trauma if you would like to learn some more. It's a pretty great video. I watched it like 3 times before doing this episode. Gabor Mate was born in 1944 in Budapest, Hungary. Tragically, both of his parents were killed in Auschwitz by the time he was only 5 months old. His aunt also went missing during this time, and his father was forced to work in labor camps while his poor mother was struggling desperately to survive as well as keep him alive. He speaks openly about how that traumatic event and many more involving it impacted his mother and himself, how it enveloped his family completely within a black fog of generational trauma. He has done everything in his power not only to put an end to the cycle of suffering from depression, addiction, and anxiety, but also to prevent further generational trauma from occurring in his own family, his children, his wife. His story has touched the lives of many, including myself, and has encouraged many to change. He has provided insight into how we deal with trauma and how we can get better despite our circumstances. And he is a personal hero to me. Like myself, many have recognized how their internalized generational trauma affects them and also affects their family dynamic and their other relationships. Instead of interviewing a guest today, I would like to interview you, the listener, and I will also be answering some of the questions for myself so that we don't feel so alone. If you would like to read over these questions yourself, I will also put them in the description. You can do this as a journal exercise if you would like, or you can answer them in your head or answer them out loud if you feel safe and if you're in an environment where you can do so. The first question is, how would you describe the unique experiences that your family has faced? An offshoot of that question would be, how did those experiences affect you as a child? And how does it still affect you as an adult? Question number 2 is, what would you describe your personality as when interacting with others? Are you shy? Are you withdrawn? Are you nervous, anxious? Do you try to match the energy of your environment, or do you shrink away? Do you resonate with any of the previous symptoms described? And I'm going to go back to that, such as emotional numbing and depersonalization, unresolved and complicated grief, isolation, withdrawal, hypervigilance, fatigue, memory loss, anger and irritability, nightmares, inability to connect with others, lack of trust with others, substance abuse, or reoccurring thoughts of death, dying, or suicide. Do you resonate with any of those? Do those have an impact on your life? Can you think of any other symptoms that you endure? What has been your healing process, if you have one? And if you don't have one yet, can you think of your grieving process? What are the things that you look forward to? Is it easy or difficult to look forward to things? Are you afraid to set expectations for things, or does that come naturally to you? Do you wish to establish boundaries with your family? If you could change anything about your current family dynamic, what would it be? I would personally change how my brothers interact with me. I would change how my mom interacts with me. I would wish that they would consider me more and show me more respect. If you could change something about your childhood, what would it be? I would personally change my level of responsibility so that I could enjoy being a carefree kid rather than a caregiver. That's what I would change. What are you going to do moving forward to prevent a cycle from continuing to your further children? If you are going to have children, or what would you do to prevent it from passing on to your friends? This is an easy one for me to answer personally, because I've thought about it a lot. When it comes to me having children in the future, which is like 5-10 years from now, I would like to involve my husband more in decisions when it comes to my kids, because I feel like my parents didn't do that enough. They would make their own separate decisions and clash with each other, which would then affect me as a kid of being scared sometimes. I will do my best to involve my husband in daily responsibilities and share the load based on how capable we both are. And if worse comes to worse and I can't handle my load, I will hire someone to help me, like a maid. If I'm completely overwhelmed, I'm gonna ask for help. That's something that I really want to change. If you do have children, what is one thing that you will not do in parenting your children? One thing I won't do is blaming them for my mistakes. I will take full accountability if I forget something. Like if I'm taking them to one of their sports and I forget to bring a drink or something, I won't say, hey, you should have remembered to grab that drink. Hey, you're the one drinking it. You should have gotten it for yourself. I won't be doing that. I will learn from my mistakes, and I will also encourage them to learn from my mistakes and do my best to improve their behavior through instruction and demonstration. I think for me as a kid, I wasn't demonstrated healthy boundaries either, and it was very difficult. And that's also a sign of generational trauma, is not having boundaries within the family, being very codependent or interdependent upon one another. Another question is, what are you proud of for yourself when facing adversity? Is there something that you're proud of that you did well when going through hard times? How can you forgive the family that raised you? What can you do to forgive them? And lastly, how can you encourage yourself today? If you did that exercise, thank you. I know it's pretty hard. It was a lot, but thank you so much for taking the time to invest in yourself. Journaling seems tedious at first, but at least for me, it helps me process my difficult emotions and move forward and figure out how to move forward. I'm proud of you for answering if you did. Thank you. Breaking the cycle is chair squeaked. Breaking the cycle is hard. It's really hard. And it's especially hard when your family doesn't recognize how their actions affected you, or they are denying how their reactions have affected you. The first step in admitting to yourself that something needs to change is recognizing that how you've been treated is not okay. Another way that you can help yourself is by telling yourself, I'm not going to continue the cycle. I'm going to do everything within my power to break that cycle. I want to say, if you're being abused, it's not your fault. It's not. If you are being mistreated, it's not your fault. You don't deserve it. No one does. And how you feel about it is valid. Generational trauma is not an excuse. It's not an excuse for treating someone bad. It's not an excuse of, well, my dad hit me, so I can hit you. That's wrong. If you're being abused, no relationship is worth enduring. Not your parents. not your siblings. If you're being hurt, you don't need to endure that because that's your mom, or that's your dad, or that's your sibling. Something I like to say to myself is that think of yourself as your best friend. You wouldn't let your best friend get abused. If someone spoke badly to your best friend, you would do everything in your power to stop that, right? So think of yourself as that best friend. That you're not going to let anything bad happen to you. I became homeless because I could no longer endure my mother's treatment of me. I got out and I started sleeping on, sleeping in my back seat. And then, my amazing boyfriend let me stay with him, and now we have an apartment together. I got out. And you can too. I know it's super hard, but it's possible. You are worth the effort it takes to get better. You are worth the effort it takes to break the cycle. A lot of times I hear parents try to pull the card, well, blood is thicker than water. That's actually wrong. Not in the sense that blood is not thicker than water, but that's a misquote of a popular saying. Actual quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Which means that the chosen bonds are stronger than the bonds that we're born into. I don't know what white woman in the South was like, blood is thicker than water. Honey, you're misquoting it. It is the bond that you forge of your own accord is thicker than the bonds that you're born into. So, to reiterate, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Also, it's not in the Bible. It's not a proverb. I'm so sick and tired of people saying that, oh, it's a proverb. It's from the Bible. It's not. It's nowhere in the Bible. It's a saying. If you want to read more misquotes, I have a link in the description. I find it kind of amusing to read them all because I'm in Texas, and there are so many quotes that we say in Texas that are just lies, that are direct misquotes of just random things. Also, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb is a quote from the 12th century. Just so that you know, this is kind of wisdom from a while ago. Family doesn't only pertain to the group that you were born into. Family can also be chosen. And if you're part of the LGBTQIA community, you know that. Family can be chosen. I mean, whenever you're starting your own family, you're choosing someone to start a family with. I want to implore you to not let family take advantage of you because they're family. Don't let family cross your boundaries. And don't let family take advantage of you for the sake of family. Love is not control. Love is not conditional upon you following the rules of someone else. And love does not result in your detriment. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It does not hold account of wrongdoing. It always hopes, always helps, always perseveres. Love never fails. You deserve true love. You deserve respect. Okay? It's hard, I know, but you do. You do deserve it. If someone is constantly disrespecting you, please cut them out. At least for a month, and see how much it changes your life. I did it. I gained so much more self-respect. I started to realize so much that I was being taken advantage of because I felt like I had to be. It's freedom. And I promise things will get better. You know, progress takes time, and the step in the right direction is a step away from the wrong one. You've got this. You do. If I've got this, you definitely got this, okay? If you need someone to talk to, please join our Discord, chat with me, chat with us. We have over 150 something members on there that would love to get to know you and help you with whatever you need. And speaking of the Discord, we have a meme. We have the meme of the week. We have the meme of the week. The meme of the week. Yes. Let's turn this around. And also, ooh, where'd it go? Okay. This is our meme of the week. I'll be showing it on the screen right here. It is a pendulum swinging between mid and cringe. It's beautiful, honestly. It's the best meme ever. And this meme of the week is from silly_fucking_rat. I love silly fucking rat. I love your memes. You brighten my day every time I see your memes in the Discord. Just a quick reminder before we part. This podcast seeks to forge a strong community, all right? So please do not hesitate to join our Discord. We have so much on there, and we have so many memes. So if you have memes that you want to share, please share them in the Discord. They will be very appreciated, okay? Thank you. We're trying to create a space where you can feel heard, where you can feel seen, where you can get resources and you can get help, okay? Trauma Dump Discord is the place for your trauma dump. So please join us. You are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise from the ashes and be filled with peace, love, joy, and understanding. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Let's spin the wheel. It landed on anger, being critical. All right, what does it mean to be critical? Being critical, to express adverse or disapproving comments or judgments. All right, so being judgmental. So how does being critical affect our trauma? For one, I can only speak of myself right now, but when someone is being critical of me and I'm going through a hard time, I start to become more critical of myself. Like if someone is making judgments towards me, I'd be like, you should have handled that in a different way. Like you were just too much. I get told so often that I'm too much, and it makes me be filled with self-loathing. So how can we change that? When someone is being critical of us, take a step back and recognize that they are not us. They do not know us the way that we know us. They do not know your circumstances, the things that are in your head. They don't know what you had for breakfast in the morning. They don't know your dreams. So if someone is being critical of you, don't let that impact you. Take that and transmute it into they're having a hard time. I'm not going to be critical of myself. All right. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for watching this episode. I'll see you later. Goodbye. There you go.